if you're able. So I'll also just start by giving a little background on myself, since Clive did ask if I was a hotelier. So Lynn Zwibak, 20 plus years in the hospitality industry. I started as a sales manager on property with Hilton, then moved over to revenue management about 5 years in, mostly with Marriott, did the rounds of doing revenue management for all types of hotels, all sizes, all locations, and then moved into revenue management training. About 7 years ago, my life changed quite a bit when I married a man who is a US diplomat, and we started moving around the world. So I first lived in Kenya for a couple of years and basically implemented revenue management for 2 boutique hotels in Nairobi. Then we moved to the Philippines, where I worked with Jackie as well as other Asia Pacific companies. Back in the United States currently, and then we'll be going abroad again. I'm also currently working with a company called Revenue Generation. We do business intelligence consulting for hotels, and I have my own revenue management training company. So that's a little bit about me. Now let's talk about what you're actually here to talk about, which is how to price your rooms. So we'll start by just posing this question: are we priced correctly? And that's such a loaded question, right? You hear from GMs, owners, your front desk staff. You probably ask yourself all the time, second guess yourself. And it sounds, I mean, it's 4 words, it sounds pretty simple, but there's a lot built into that question. And what it's really asking, among other things, is, does our price reflect the value that the customers get from our product and that they think they get from our product? Does our price make sense relative to the hotels that we're competing against? And does our price allow us to capture the business that's going to make us the most money? So where do we begin to answer those questions? Well, that's why you're here, to learn about the price value analysis tool, which we're going to talk about. So the agenda is we are going to talk a bit about the price value relationship. And a lot of this, I know both of you, it seems, have been in the industry for quite a long time. So you know this, and it, you know, it's not rocket science, but we'll talk through it, maybe hopefully in a way that provides a slightly different way of thinking about it, puts a little bit more tangible context around it, and helps you kind of narrow down of where to go with your pricing. Then we'll talk about customized pricing, or price discrimination, which is a term I don't love. Then we'll get into how to complete the tool and analyzing the results. So we're going to talk about the first 3 items today, and then we'll start analyzing the results next week. Is there anything specific before we get started that, any topics, ideas, questions, anything burning that you want to make sure we cover?
I mean, I think price parity is always something that's spoken about quite a lot.
Price parity.
And something that's just totally unavoidable. Yeah, and then also kind of sort of OTA sort of tricks they do into their commission and stuff, which is, again, something that we could all do without, but we can't do without, you know. So yeah, that's
yeah. So that's not.
And then the third point I'll make is analyzing your comp set and making sure. I'm kind of a believer in the brand and the value of what you offer. You can hold your own price position. You don't necessarily always have to be the cheapest. But then at the same time, you need a certain amount of occupancy. You don't want to cut off your own nose to spite your face, kind of thing. So there's a certain game that needs to be played in when you set your prices, so you don't shoot yourself in the foot as well. And that's when things like the STR report become very useful.
Yeah, and we will cover that a little bit. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'll throw in some more thoughts that aren't necessarily built into the presentation around that. Price parity and OTAs are not part of the agenda today, but happy to talk about them. I have a lot of opinions on it. This is being recorded, so I will I'll be careful what I say, but I'll also say that my opinion has actually started to change a lot recently. So we can have a lively discussion about that at the end. So the price value relationship. Okay, so the price, it's a number, right? But like, where does it come from and what does it represent? So if you can think about it as the price being how much the buyer is willing to pay, how much the seller is willing to accept, and what makes sense relative to the competition. So the ultimate ideal price is where these three concepts meet. And the purpose of the tool is to get there. I'll say now, and to Clive's point, and I'll repeat this a lot, don't assume that your competition knows what they're doing. Don't assume that they're priced correctly. So we talk about what makes sense relative to the competition, but that kind of implies that the competition is right. So you have to question their pricing as you're questioning your relationship to their pricing. So the most important part, I think, when setting this price is really from the customer's perspective and how the customer perceives the value. So a few things to remember. Value is subjective. Everybody has a different opinion of what something values. Value is a benefit, but it's not necessarily a value to all customers. For example, a hotel gym. A lot of people say that they want a gym, but how many people actually use the gym? I'm proud to say that I actually am one of the people who does use the gym, but most people, a lot of people don't. So the gym is actually more valuable to me than it is to, say, my mother, who brings her shoes and plans to go on the treadmill, but never actually does. And benefits have different values for different customers. So this translates to our discussion because different market segments and different customer types, you can think of them like me and my mother, they place different value on different products. And the other thing I'll say is that from the customer's perspective, the value of the product has nothing to do with the actual cost of the product. So this is an ongoing debate between my husband and I, for example, because when we're traveling, I want to buy souvenirs wherever we are, handmade, local, authentic. And he insists that I always overpay because it's like, the materials are relatively cheap. How long does it take the person to actually make that? You're getting taken advantage of. And my response is, okay, but I'm not paying for a block of wood in somebody's time. I'm paying for a memory and, an elephant or a zebra or whatever that's going to sit on my shelf and mean something to me. So,
and you mightn't mind overpaying when it's someone who's probably doesn't get very much money in their income.
Oh, exactly. I mean, yeah, I wasn't even going to go down that road, but that's like, $1 to me is not the same as $1 to somebody in Kenya, but I always go at it from, but it's worth it. It's valuable to me, and it's more about how much it means to me. So I think I'm right, and that's how we're going to approach this discussion. So when we're talking about price and value related to the customers, there's a few terms that are important to keep in mind. So the perceived value, that is the worth of the product or services to the customer. So how much is that hand-carved elephant worth to me? What is my personal value placed on it. So perceived value is the value from the customer's perspective. So that's the overriding concept. And then when we talk about how much people are actually willing to pay, we start talking about price sensitivity. So price sensitivity is the degree to which changes in price impact people's buying behavior. Some products have higher price sensitivity, some have lower price sensitivity. If I've been driving for 5 hours and I'm really tired and I need to pull over and sleep, probably going to be a little less price sensitive to whatever the hotel on the side of the road is charging than if I'm planning ahead and preparing for a room, tomorrow night. I might be a little more price sensitive because I have options. And then the opposite of price sensitivity is the willingness to pay. So that's the maximum amount that an individual is willing to sacrifice to procure the product. So you can kind of think, like, we talk about price sensitivity and we talk about willingness to pay, and we usually kind of use them interchangeably. In other words, like, what's the value of the product to the customer? But they really are two different sides of the same coin. Oh, and Loretta joined us. Hello, Loretta. Welcome. So that discussion leads us to this customized pricing. And like I said, it's traditionally known as price discrimination. I don't know if that's what it's known on your side of the world, but that's what people tend to call it here. And I don't like that term because it implies unfairness. And I would argue that customized pricing is actually fair because you are matching the price with the value. So you're doing a better job of giving customers what they really want in a way that is important to them. I'll explain what I mean. So customized pricing will define as charging different prices to different buyers for the same or a slightly different version of the same product. And, we all do this, right? You're going to charge a different rate to a leisure traveler than a business traveler. So the benefits to the hotel of customized pricing and the benefits to the customers can be seen by looking at the room sales response curve. So a little bit of geometry here. If you remember back, we're going to be talking about area here. So the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Okay? So keep that in mind. And what's going on here in this curve is the vertical y-axis is rooms sold, and the x-axis is price per room. So basically, my mouse is very sensitive. The point on the line where the number of rooms sold matches the price per room. So at $100, say, we sell, I can't see, that's really small, whatever number that is, however many rooms we sell. And then the revenue is the area under, or the area of that square. So if we had perfect price customization where we could offer the exact price to match the value of every single customer, then this would be our sales curve, the blue line, B2C, and revenue would be the area under the curve, or the area of this triangle. So it'd be 1/2 times 200 rooms times $200. It's a fictional scenario for $20,000 in revenue. So literally, we're selling 200 different rates to 200 different people. Now, unfortunately, that's not possible. We have to choose prices to offer to people and hope that they match up with what they're willing to pay. If we chose one price, so here we go with that $100 for 100 rooms, then we would sell $100 for 100 rooms, and our revenue would be the area of the square. So 100 times 100 would be 10,000. But look at all this empty white space on the top and on the bottom. That's revenue that we're not capturing. So the area at the top, marked by this X, is the revenue from the people who didn't buy because the price was too high. They're people who would have bought if the price were 99 or 98 or 97, but it wasn't, it was 100. So we missed out.
That's
on
the
their
why.
revenue.
That's the why you're talking about, right? The Y is the money, the Y mark or the X mark? Sorry, you're talking about
The
the
X
X mark,
mark.
right? Oh, sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's skipping a, is it skipping ahead? No, okay, right. Yeah, the mouse is sensitive. You weren't supposed to see the Y yet. So the X, yeah, it's a little backwards. Like when you think about it, you would think the area on the top should be the people who are paying more, but what I skipped in the explanation was that this is the demand curve of the typical supply and demand relationship from microeconomics. So demand curve is downward sloping. People tend to buy more or buy less when the price goes up. So that area at the top is the people for whom the price was too high. The area at the bottom, the Y, that's the price, or that's the extra money that would have been paid by people who are willing to pay more. So for example, if we charged $150, we would have sold fewer rooms, but there were people who were willing to pay $50 more. So this lower area marked by the Y is all that extra money we left on the table. Well, we don't want to leave money on the table or prevent people from buying our product if it's important to them. So we offer different price points. So let's say we had a price point of $160. So these might be our business travelers. They're booking at the last minute. They're willing to pay a higher rate. There's fewer of them. In this case, we'll sell 40 rooms at $160. We'll earn $6,400. Okay. Then there's our leisure travelers. So let's say we have 60 of them. Let's say we have 60 of them. They're willing to pay $100. That's another $6,000. And then we have our bargain hunters. Really cheap. I don't know if you guys have Priceline or Hotwire or any other opaque or bargain site out there, but these are the rooms you're just throwing out there to get the heads in the beds. Another $2,400. So here you can see that we're starting to cut into that extra white space, and more of the area under the triangle is getting colored in. Remember, the colored area is our revenue. So we want as much of this triangle to be filled in as possible. So when we have 3 price points, if we add up the areas of these squares, we end up with $14,800 in revenue. $14,800 is more than the $10,000 that we had by only offering one price point. Granted, it's less than the $20,000 that we would have earned had we been able to fill in the entire triangle, but we're getting there. So if the geometry and the math didn't resonate with you, that's okay. Not everyone's a math geek like I am. I have 2 math teacher parents. But I would say just keep in mind this picture and just remember, the more price points you have, the more colored rectangles you're going to have, and colored rectangles mean revenue. So that's the math and the philosophy concept behind this price customization. Or I said that it's more fair for customers as well. What I mean there is that if we only have one price, we're basically not providing an option for the people who value the product less than us. We're preventing those people at the lower end of the curve. So offering a lower price for them, we're helping them to partake of our product. Now, we also have people who place a higher value on our product. Those are the people towards the right side of the curve. And by offering a higher price, we're saving the product for them, for the people that value it more. So customized pricing does a better job of matching up the product availability with the value that people place on it. And I'll end that discussion with this image and quote. And we've all been there, right? On an airplane, you know that you're not paying the same rate as the person sitting next to you. And I love this quote. If I have 2,000 customers on a given route and 400 different prices, I'm obviously short 1,600 prices. So he's talking about that perfect price customization triangle. And Bob Crandall he was the CEO of American Airlines back in the late 70s and 80s. American Airlines is basically the company that invented the concept of revenue management. So even then, he knew that there would be a different price for every customer. At which point, though, you might be asking yourself, but isn't it the same product? How can we charge a different price to people for the same exact product? And I'll just remind you that it may be the same physical product, but we're not talking about the cost of the product. We're not talking about the bed and the lobby and the housekeeping service. We're talking about the value of the product. So what is that product worth to the customer? And that is not the same. So again, customized pricing matches up the price with the value of each individual customer. I will pause here and just open it up. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts on what we've just talked about?
Certainly,
Again,
it's just certainly a different way of looking at it. I'm just looking at the slide from before that you showed where you've got, like you say, I think you said the business traveler willing, just this one, yeah. But you got the business traveler willing to pay $160. And then you got like the next group willing to pay 100, and then the next group willing to kind of pay $40. I'm assuming you're not looking at this on a linear basis, am I right? You're looking at it more like the segments of the corporate that are willing to pay one rate, and the OTA that pay one rate in advance, or the travel agent, wholesale and stuff like that that will ultimately pay another price. Am I right?
You mean in terms of buckets of people rather than individual people? Yeah. And we'll actually talk a little bit about market segments, but yeah, and we have to group the people because we don't yet have the ability to literally offer an individual price to each person. I'm not.
Yeah.
I won't say that I don't think.
It's basically your desired ADR for each bucket, each segment, right? Is that how you're looking at it, rather than a linear demand where the price naturally goes up anyway?
Oh, yes. You're basically. Okay. No, I understand what you're asking. I'm just trying to think of how to answer. Yeah, so linear demand being that as you move along, you're an MBA, this is all fresh in your mind. As you move along the curve, as the price goes up, then the number of rooms sold is going to go down. That's the typical demand curve, right? So here we're kind of chunking the demand curve, and we're forcing the supply to match that price. And now I'm getting outside the scope, but the difference between hotel pricing and most other things is that the supply is fixed. In microeconomics, you can assume that demand will change to match supply, or sorry, supply will change to match demand. We can't change our demand. God, it's early in the morning. Supply will change to match demand. Hotels, we can't change our supply. We have a fixed number of rooms. The only way we can manage supply or, purchase is by changing the price. So by doing this, we're setting up individual supply curves, essentially, where supply equals demand. I hope I didn't confuse you more with my.
No, that's good. It's also just to throw in the mix, obviously we're dealing with a perishable product ultimately.
Oh, yes.
But that's a whole nother topic, I think, for another day.
Yes, which happy to offer a class on that too, Jackie. Yeah, and I remember when I first saw this, and I don't remember what class I was in and it just clicked. I finally understood why it makes sense to offer different prices. Any other questions? Okay, great. So just to wrap up this conceptual portion, we will talk a little bit about market segments, or who are your customers. And market segments, you can really segment your customers in multiple ways. There's two of the most common are by the booking type, so either group or transient, or by the purpose of travel, leisure or business or leisure. And these different groups start to represent those price points on the triangle and the different prices and rooms sold that you're going to offer. These are really broad categories. And as systems and customers become more and more sophisticated, this starts to become more and more granular. You get many more rows on the tree. How you break this down is really up to you. Frankly, probably more up to your PMS system and whatever other systems you're using. It could be, well, it's probably a combination of both. You probably have a market segment for OTA business and a market segment for leisure business and retail business, and sort of a mishmash of different purposes of travel and booking types. And you probably have a lot more than 2 or 4. But however it is broken down, that's how you want to think about those different price points. And I'll say too, traditionally market segments were usually thought of, in terms of demographics too, like certain types of people were going to be transient, certain types of people were going to be group, business or leisure. But I like to think of market segments as customers who exhibit the same buying behavior, because that's what we really care about. For this purpose, we don't really care about who they are. We care about how they're going to buy. And implicit in that is how they value our product. So when you think about who your customers are and you start to fill out the tool, which we're about to get into, you want to make sure that you're thinking very specifically about a specific market segment. So if you have 3 major market segments, you want to perform this analysis that we're about to go through 3 different times, because each of those places a different value on your product. So, okay, Jackie, if you could send out the tool, getting into that. So everyone check your email in a moment. So we've just talked through a lot of conceptual background on pricing and customized pricing and value to different market segments. So that's great. But what do you actually do with that information? Well, now we're going to look at the tool that actually helps you to pin down what all that means for your room prices. So this tool, it's an Excel file, has 3 sections. Well, 3, I guess, key areas. You want to determine what market segment you're talking about. You want to identify the competition for that specific market segment. And then you're going to identify the attributes to be assessed for that particular market segment. And we'll talk through what I mean by all of these.
Lynn, could you just go over that one more time? I was just downloading the tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first thing before filling it, well, the first thing to fill out is the market segment, because we want to be really clear that we're performing this analysis only for one market segment, only for one price point, because we want to really hone in on those customers and how much they value our product. We're going to look at the competition for that market segment, because competition can vary for different segments. And then we're going to look at attributes, and those are the actual features and benefits that are important to that market segment. Much more information to come on each of those. So when you first open it up, disclaimer, you may see a warning that looks like this. Just make sure you click enable content. I promise I don't have any viruses in there, but if you don't click enable content, it's not going to work. If you don't see that message, don't worry about it. Just a little walk through what you're looking at. The first page is the instructions. This looks really complicated. You don't actually need to look at this at all because we're going to talk through it. But if you do...
Sorry to interrupt. Just go to, you mean in the tool that's been sent, just go to start course, right?
Start course?
I don't know. I've just clicked on the link that's been sent and it says start course. So I'm not sure if I'm looking at the same thing.
Oh,
sorry, my bad. That's the link to the course. I just hit send for us to send you a spreadsheet to open. Sorry, while we were talking, I was sitting there enrolling you all in the course. So sorry, that was bad timing, wasn't it?
Got it.
You got it?
Okay.
Have you got it,
So
Loretta and Yukiko? You got the email?
Open the Excel, right?
Yes, open the Excel.
Okay, got it now.
Okay.
Just got a bit confused then. Cool.
Just making sure you're all paying attention.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
When did you send email?
Just right now. You'll probably
Just
just
right
get
now?
it. Yeah.
Let me check.
But it's the same one we gave you in the class in Phuket.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
And Loretta, I assume you're good, but please speak up if you're not. Okay.
Okay, yeah, got it.
This screen looks complex now. Here we go.
Like I said, you don't need to worry about this screen because I'm going to talk you through it all. This screen is for the people that don't take this class, but just get their hands on the tool and want to use it. Now, this screen is also here as a reference for you if you forgot something or you want clarification. But for now, we can skip this screen. The analysis tool tab, that's where we're going to go next.
Yeah.
And then the sample is just a visual of a completed tool if you want to see what it's supposed to look like when it's all done. But we're going to spend our time in this middle tab, analysis tool. There's navigation buttons. These are screenshots from the different sections. So you can click on the buttons to move throughout the sections, or you can just scroll, frankly. And there is error checking built in. So if you enter something that the tool doesn't like, that doesn't fit in with the formulas, you'll get a message telling you what you need to do. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So in the tool, there are 3 sections. The first section is the inputs. And this is where we're going to go back through and fill these out together. I just want to give you an overview of what we're going to be looking at. So section 1 is, like I said, the input. So this is the basic information about your hotel, the competitors, and the attributes, those 3 items I talked about. Section 2 is where you enter the ratings. This is your homework. Again, I'll explain what I'm talking about in a moment. And then section 3 is the output. This is the goal of the tool, is to get to this chart. Your chart will look different. And then this is where the analysis happens. So let's look at each of those more closely. Sorry, I changed this from the 1-hour session and it seems some of my slides are out of order. But we'll start with session 1, the inputs. So fill in your hotel information. I'm going to be filling this in for a fictional hotel, but this will apply for your own hotel. And you can do it now, you can do it later, whatever's easiest for you. You only fill data in the white cells. Everything else is protected, so you can't break it. But for the section 1, fill in your hotel name. My fictional hotel is called the Hotel Grand. I'll skip the target market for a moment. Fill in your room type. Again, we want to get really granular and hone in on one rate for one market segment, so we're only looking at one room type. So pick your standard room probably, and then your rate. So whatever your published rate for that room type.
So you're going to kind of go lead room type, basically.
Yeah. I mean, if you could do it for different room types, but that's more advanced.
Yeah.
And then for target market, again, be really specific about who you're looking at as the target market. So in this case, we'll just pick social, but you can use whatever is relevant for you. Next section is competitors. And this is key. You want to, in this case, don't just go with the comp set in your STR report or the hotels in your call around. Really think about the competitors that you face for the specific market segment that you're talking about. And a couple of good questions to ask yourself when thinking about competitors for market segment are, which hotels offer facilities and services like yours? Who do you compete against for the same business? And my favorite is, if your guests were not staying at your hotel, where would they stay? It could be the hotel next door. It could be the hotel down the street, but it could be, frankly, a hotel in a different city. I know we have Phuket and Pattaya, so they're both leisure destinations. So you are competing against other hotels, in your area, but maybe you're also competing against hotels in Boracay, which is what I know from the Philippines. So make sure you're not just thinking geographically, but you're really thinking conceptually. If a guest doesn't find what they want in Phuket, where else may they even look to go on vacation? Few caveats. Be realistic. Sometimes we like to think of hotels being competitors that aren't really competitors. They're sort of aspirational. We want to think that people consider us when they consider them, but those hotels are better quality and in a different price point, so they're not really competitors. So be realistic with yourself. Don't use who you want to be competing against. And keep in mind that you may have different competitors for different market segments. Okay, so we have 2 resort destinations. So you might think of market segments in terms of families and couples, right? So maybe families, for a family, it's really important that there's children's activities, right? So that the kids have something to do. Not so much for the couples. So if you're filling this out for the family market segment, you might include a competitor that also has recreational facilities for children. But you wouldn't include a hotel that does not. Now, that hotel that does not have family recreational facilities may end up being a competitor for your couples market segment. So just make sure you're matching up the facilities in each of the competitors with what the market segment actually is looking for. Okay. So then when you fill it in, so fill in your competitors. There's room for 7. You don't need 7. I recommend you have at least 4. There's room for the number of guest rooms. That doesn't actually factor into the calculations, but I find it's helpful to think about the number of rooms because hotels with fewer rooms tend to lean on the higher price point. So it's helpful for me to just have that to keep it all in perspective. And then the room rate, and that's really important. So fill in the room rate, their published rate for that particular market segment.
Sorry, just to interrupt. We'll put number of rooms, right, for ourselves, but only in relation to one particular room type. Am I right?
Oh, no, that's a good question. No, in this case, you would want to do total number of rooms. So the room type, yeah, the room type
we
is
focus on one type, but we put the total number of keys in the hotel.
Exactly, yeah.
Not for that room type. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Yeah, because the size of the hotel is going to dictate the overall pricing. Yes, yeah, that's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. Okay, so competitors, pretty straightforward. You can probably come up with these off the top of your head. The third part, so it gets a little more tricky. So this is attributes. And these are the actual features, qualities, benefits, facilities, whatever you want to call it, that the customer is looking for in your hotel. So for families traveling, it could be children's play area, could be an attribute. For a couples market segment, it could be fine dining restaurant. Again, there's room for 7. You don't need to fill in all 7, but fill in as many as are relevant. For our sample hotel, I'm just going to go pretty generic: guest rooms, location, pool, restaurant, service, lobby, and fitness center. Yours will probably look very different than this. And going back to something that was said earlier, one I haven't thought about, but would be a great attribute to include would be the brand or the name or something a little less tangible of how much value do the customers place on the sign on the hotel. So think through these, and some may be less obvious, some are very obvious, but try to really hone in again on what's important to those customers. Now, when you first fill in the attributes, you'll notice that they show up in red. And we get this error message: total must equal 100%, add weights for attributes in red. So the weights, what are we talking about? Each attribute is going to be assigned a weighting. And this is a reflection of how important each attribute is to that market segment. In other words, how much of the customer's decision is based on the attribute. The weights must add up to 100%. So you're basically going through and saying, when a customer's deciding where to stay, 20% of their decision is going to be based on the quality of the guest rooms. 20% is going to be based on the location, so on and so forth. Now, don't get really hung up on the nuance and like the minutia of these weightings, like 20%, 25%, 22%, like don't spend your time on that. What we really want is just a general feeling of how important things are to people. So the guest rooms in this case are more important than the lobby, right? 20% is greater than 5%. Not to say that the lobby isn't important because it made the list, but it's not as important as the guest rooms. So again, you know, think through this, but don't worry so much about the actual number. But like I said, they do need to add up to 100%. So if they don't, this percent total will show in red. When it equals 100, it'll turn green. Okay, so guest rooms, lobby. Are there any questions about the weight? Okay. So once you do all that, your section 1 is going to look like this, or something like this. And you can click on the Go to Ratings button and move down to the next section, which will look like this. You can see the information on your hotel, the competitors, and the attributes copied over. The competitors are the left side of this bottom chart. The attributes and the weights are across the top. The middle section is white. That's where we're going to fill in the ratings. And because we haven't yet, we get this error message. All right, so how do we rate? Well, we're going to rate the customers on a scale of -3 to 3. Your hotel is at 0. Your hotel is the baseline, and everything you're looking at is going to compare the competitor to you. If it's worse than you, it's negative. If it's better than you, it's positive. And the distance from you is how much better or worse it is. So let's say we're talking about guest rooms. A hotel that has slightly nicer guest rooms than you would rate as a 1. A hotel that has much nicer guest rooms than you would rate as a 3. Stop me if there's any questions. So there's 2 ways we can, or really two good ways to go about rating your customers. And I know we're getting close to time, but we are almost done. So one is to actually go and visit your customer, or not your customers, your competitors, to actually go and visit the hotels. And I'm sure you all probably have. You may be able to do some of these ratings from memory. But another really great way to do this is to go on one of these review sites, TripAdvisor, Booking.com, Google, and read the reviews. Because there, the customers will literally tell you, A, what is important to them, and B, what they think of their competitors and you. So you might find some really interesting things in there. And it may identify for you some attributes or some competitors that you hadn't originally thought of. So once you've done that, you're going to come back and fill in all those ratings in the white cells. Again, if any of this was too fast or was confusing, you can always go back to the instructions section. So this is what you're going to be working on over the next week and what we'll be talking about next week. I realize you're probably not going to be able to go and visit 7 competitors in 1 week. So fill in as much as you can, as much as you have from memory. Basically, we want to have something that we can look at and talk about next week. Okay, so now the official pause for questions. are there any questions?
No, all pretty straightforward. And then from this competitor analysis, you're going to know where to position yourself on a price basis, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna, I mean, you can all look at the sample, but I'm not gonna skip ahead and tell you how we analyze it, because I want to do that together. Because that's the fun part. But basically having all the information to do the analysis is what you're all going to be working on. So that is your homework before next class. Thank you.
Lovely.
And then, yeah, come back with a completed tool. Be prepared. I would like to discuss some of them with the class, so hopefully nobody's too shy. But that really is where the magic happens, where the learning takes place.
So in the next session, we can actually share what we found, right? Brilliant.
Yep. Yeah, we'll first go through an example.
There's no competitors. There's no competitors in the group, I don't think, where you're in the same vicinity or anything. So
yeah, it should be fine.
Yeah.
I don't think that's an issue. I work for a family-run hotel. It's not a chain.
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. So we'll go through an example with my sample hotel and talk about how to think about it, and then we'll do that for you all too. So wonderful.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for today.
Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you and all the people who are listening to this recorded. I look forward to seeing you live here next week,
we hope. So also you should have 2 emails. One's got your 2 links, the link for today and a link for next week. And then you should have another email with the link to the online course, which takes you through this process much slower than Lynn just did. So you can take your time later as well and have a look.
And if you have any questions, you can email me in the meantime. Happy to work through any challenges with you.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you very much.
So the email I sent you with the spreadsheet in it has Lynn's email address in it, so you can respond to her if you've got anything you're worried about in the meantime.
Okay, wonderful.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all next week.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you next week.
Yeah, thanks. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.